There's a senior official at the CIA who for 20 years has been very, very supportive. He's part of that group, but he's on the side of disclosure. But he can't stick his neck out too far because he saw what happened to former CIA Director Colby. When he stuck his neck out, he was going to give, Bill Colby, the CIA Director, I think for Ford and Nixon, was going to hand off one of these zero-point free energy devices and about $50 million in seed money so we could get it out to the public. And the week he was going to meet with a member of my board, they found him floating down the Potomac River. Almost absolutely, he was assassinated. We can't prove it, but his best friend, a colonel, met with me and said, yes, that's what happened, and he knew it was a risk. So a lot of people who are friendly to this, who are on the inside, are afraid of being tweaked, terminated with extreme prejudice. And then you have other people who aren't on the inside who don't have the courage of the ridicule factor, because the New York Times and the Washington Post, the big media outfits that are wholly owned subsidiaries of the intelligence community, frankly, when it comes to this issue, are going to absolutely roast and ridicule any politician that brings up the word UFO. It has to be done like on Kimmel, you know, just sort of ha ha ha, make a joke of it. So in 1953, the CIA decided that the psychological warfare aspects of this would be where the real enforcement could be, by just making it ridiculous. And they actually engaged, I have a document that proves this, Disney Studios, to make cartoons about little green men so that it would become the laughing stock and sort of defang the whole issue into sort of silliness. And so it has remained for 60 years. So it takes a lot of courage, not just in terms of your personal safety, but your reputation, because you're going to be ridiculed and laughed out of meetings, or you're going to be teased. And most people don't want to be ridiculed. I'm just the kind of person, I don't care what someone says about me. I mean, everything terrible you can imagine has been said about me, and so what? I mean, you just expect it. So, but most people in a public eye don't want to do that. And so disclosure is going to have to be with the people. So we initiated that in 2001, and we continue to do that. And I think that the biggest problem we've had, and I wrote a paper about this called When Disclosure Serves Secrecy. Now, this paper, I wish you would read it and memorize it. Everything I predicted in that a long time ago, it's on our website. And if you sign up for our email service, we occasionally send it out. It's a free newsletter. You can just sign up. It's seriousdisclosure.com. It's free. It's completely provided to the public. That paper describes the dangers of doing what we've done. And that is disclosure being hijacked by charlatans who masquerade as disclosure folks, who attach to all the body of evidence I put together the fear factor and the silly season and the evil aliens are coming to eat us for lunch. Yeah. All right? And that has happened. And the betrayals I will not go into because it will break your heart. So the truth is, the thing that keeps me up most at night is all this information being folded into which is all solid information, being folded into disinformation that's tailored to scare the public into what General MacArthur said, and that is World War III will be interplanetary. So now let me talk about the deepest USAP. The deepest unacknowledged special access project is the one that is tasked with doing the psychological propaganda, just like Hitler did with his program, for convincing the people that there's a threat that we should fight. This was launched in the 50s and 60s. First they made the subject ridiculous, and then they made it terrifying, like the movie Independence Day. And this was all part of a plan hatched in the 50s to be sure that we could continue to grow the military-industrial complex, but instead of just one country, sort of a unipolar expenditure out of mainly the United States and at that time Soviet Union, it'd be a global junta military effort because there's a threat from outer space. And they have done about 50 years, 60 years of very, very careful preparation. Now, the UFO subculture is replete with the influence of that. Most people don't understand it. And I wasn't surprised when I got a document in the 1990s from the Strategic Studies Institute describing this project, and this is going to be in our next film, if I can find a director that wants to make this film. And it describes creating a worldwide subculture and cult around alien abductions using stagecraft, I'm quoting, and using advanced aerospace devices, i.e. man-made UFOs, anti-gravities, with creatures that could pass as aliens to engage in events to scare people so that the public could be turned to believe that there's one or more civilizations that we should unite against and fight. And Ronald Reagan at the United Nations literally said, wouldn't our job of creating a unified world be easier if we had a common alien threat? This is, you can Google this clip of Reagan saying this. So that agenda and the Star Wars programs that go with it, and 90+% of all UFO subculture books, movies, conferences are infected with that virus. Now, I'm saying unwittingly in many cases, because how would you know? If you haven't been read into a program that is so sensitive, and I've had physicists who worked at the Dulce complex and at the Pine Gap complex in Australia, that where they manufacture these what are called programmed life forms, these things that look like aliens that are 100% man-made, have integrated circuits in their neural complex, but they're biologicals, and they're on board these. But the people running the craft are military or corporate guys. And they'll sick these things on people, and they'll abduct them and put an implant in them. And the implants are made by EG&G. They're on the edge of the Nellis Range. You want to hear more? All right, this is the stuff people really hate me for. Because I was told that if I expose this is where I'd be most at risk. Okay, because now I'm stepping on the toes of the eschatological fantasies of the people who want endless war. Eschatology is the study of how the world's going to end. And at the core of this secret group are folks who want to precipitate an Armageddon-type conflagration that's War of the Worlds. Because they love and they do it because they want people to be united around another common enemy, not just one country or subculture or religion, but the whole planet. Go look at the movie Independence Day. It's a script right out of the CIA. And so the whole point of that is that you have got to prepare people to hate. So, you know, it's not politically correct to hate someone who's African American if you're white, or if a gay person if you're straight, or hate women if you're a male, or a Jewish person. But it's completely okay to hate an entire planetary group of people, whether they're called grays or greens or purples or whatever, because they know that humans have within them this flaw. And it's in the primate monkey mind that is the root of tribalism. And I want to deconstruct this for a moment. We are 98.5% identical to chimpanzees and gorillas. And chimpanzees and gorillas do organize into troops and into warring sects that kill each other. And it is usually based on slight differences of whether territory or appearance. And this can be exploited by demagogues, whether it's religious demagoguery, racial demagoguery, sexism, homophobia. Just pick it. Well, the big one is interspecies. So the next one is, let's get everyone prepared, and we can use these images, just like Hitler used the image of, you know, the blood libels of Germany, you know, portraying Jewish people as grinding up children for matzah meal, and this outrageous stuff that was propaganda. No, this is all true. Go look it up. unfortunately, most people don't know any history, but you know, if you go look up the history of World War II, there was a foundation built for years for the Third Reich. That's what the Fourth Reich is doing, this secret government. And they've done it very well, extremely well. Now, I met with a man who would not come forward, who was on one of these early abduction squads. Now, don't get me wrong, not everyone who's had contact has had a false abduction happen, but the whole thing's been commingled. I've had contact, but it wasn't an abduction. So what I tell people is that if you mix this together and people don't know that there are two distinct things going on, you think they're all the same phenomenon when they are not. And this man said in the early days, before they had these programmable things that look like life forms, that look alien, they would use little guys that were short and do a Hollywood mask and suit on one of these anti-grav devices. This is back in the 60s and 50s, 60s, 70s, and abduct people. And so they started this program a long time ago. And it's very easy to do. Very easy if you understand the technology. Now, this is the other problem. Most people don't understand the extraterrestrial technology, and if you don't understand that, you're not going to understand what the reverse engineering spinoffs have been, one of which is what I'm describing. So when they realized that they could stagecraft this, and this is described in the Strategic Studies Institute document. I don't know, the director of the film Sirius didn't want to put that in there. He thought it was too controversial. The next film will have it in there. I'm going to override whoever the director is, that this has got to be in there. But that way you prepare the population for a new enemy to fight. How else can you grow the military-industrial complex from $1 trillion a year enterprise to a $3 trillion or $4 trillion or $6 trillion? You have to have an enemy. As Leon Panetta said, we're spending $110 billion a year to chase 70 al-Qaeda members in Afghanistan. He said that. So how do you keep that juggernaut going? You've got to have another and a bigger enemy. So in the meanwhile, they'll concoct and create and keep the fire burning, manipulate the world to keep the fire burning deliberately. And that's what we've seen over the last decade. We go in and break Iraq, and then it creates, it just keeps this fire burning. However, the big surprise that's coming, 1,000 times worse than 9/11, is this false flag operation to stage a threat from outer space. There was a man who came to the congressional briefings in 1997, and he was prepared to open this entire box, Pandora's box of issues, to the members of Congress there. And I will not share his name. I keep a confidence. He was going to do it. The night before the congressman came, some intel people came to his room who he had worked with in those projects and begged him not to disclose it. And so he left. He was actually taken that night to a secure facility out in Virginia, and we never saw him again. He left a note under Sherry Adamak's door explaining what happened. But he had told me privately, would not go on camera, that he in 1974 had been on an interagency intelligence committee that had all this already planned out, and they could hit a button and they could release events that would look like ET craft that are man-made anti-gravities, do things that would look like an alien assault on Earth that would stampede the entire world like 9/11 did into fear, where they would then be able to say our next big challenge is to stave off the alien invasion. And I said, how ready was he? He says, we could have hit a button and the whole thing would have run, and that was in '74. Now, that's only because he was on that committee in 1974. He told me, but he said it was fully operational well before then. So we're getting into some really deep and dark stuff here. Some people are very disturbed when I share this. I don't think we have to, it's childhood's end today. You have to go into this with eyes wide open. And so one of my real concerns in putting together all the evidence and information I have on this is that then there are other people who are within the UFO subculture who will take the disclosure moniker and fold it into mutilations and abductions and evil aliens and this and that and the other thing. And I warned about this 10 or 15 years ago. And so it has come to pass. And I am very disturbed by it. It's the one thing that makes me want to shut down all my efforts. Because I don't want to hurt human consciousness more than it's already been injured. You know, my whole purpose is to help us get to a point where we become a peaceful planet that becomes interplanetary and interstellar. Not World War III that's interplanetary. But people who are not very nuanced in their thinking, or as Dr. Richard Haynes at NASA used to say, unselective filters, non-selective filters. They just let anything through and are not discerning, will take information and documents and witnesses and people I have and then fold it in to this other disinformation, and they do not have the discernment because they have not been at meetings with people from Pine Gap and Lockheed and the Cube. The Cube is the big underground facility that Lockheed Martin Skunk Works runs up in the high desert near Edwards Air Force Base. It's the state of the art, where all these things are done. And at Dulce, which does exist. There's a man on my team who worked at Los Alamos National Labs as an engineer, senior guy, who knew a man who got on an underground connector going from Los Alamos to Dulce to work on these projects. Now, if you go to Dulce, there's nothing there because it's accessible only underground. It's accessible from Los Alamos, it's accessible from Nellis, and it's accessible from Edwards, all the way from Edwards, Air Force Base in the high desert of California. But these underground connectors, this is no myth. They do exist, and they're maglev, anti-grav, sort of, but they're underground. And you go in one place, and boom, surface in another. Now, this brings up the question is, it's like the old song from the 70s, Don't Be Fooled Again, or The Who, we won't be fooled again. Will we? And I think that's the problem. Knowledge is the greatest purifier, it says in the Vedic and tradition in the Bhagavad Gita. So knowledge is key. We have to share this information, but we have to do it in a way that presents the full story. And that's what I wanted to do today, is to provide the background of disclosure, but also how fraught it is for being hijacked by people who lack the wisdom, frankly, and the insight to know that they're being played by the intelligence community like a fiddle.